Welcome to Backyard Cigars. And I totally get it. Totally get it. You guys don't want to watch a video of someone like me, regardless of how good looking I am, reading and talking about things that happened in the early 19th century. And I get that, especially when it comes to ads for cigars that you may never try, have never heard of, or just don't care about. Well, before I present my next video, which will be another historical lesson with me doing some more of this boring talk. And I'm going to talk for about 14 minutes or so, but I really urge you to maybe listen to some of it because what I'm talking about really as I'm beginning the video is I'm talking about the 1919 strike that occurred in Boston and New York City and affected a lot of cigar manufacturers. So the labor unions issued a strike and they executed it, and that brought about a lot of problems. And I'm going to talk about that. And I've talked about it previously on how that affected the handmade cigar industry. Well, I go on to talk more about why the strike happened. And then we start to talk about some of the conditions in these early cigar factories and how they were evolving and how things were bettering, but not quite, if you know what I mean. And then we have finally, which I think was the most damning piece of evidence against the labor unions, was their actual response that was printed in the Shoemaker's Journal. And this response detailed uh, what they felt about Waitt Bond and other cigar manufacturers in regards to them moving from their original locations and abandoning their warehouses. And so I do talk about that, and I also talk a little bit about how advertisement shaped the opinion of cigar smokers during that time, and how they couldn't really rely on the Better Business Bureau and other bureaus for information regarding sanitary conditions. So the cigar industry had to deal with that as well as the change. Finally, I end with the change of the handmade cigar to the machine made cigar. And we're not even talking about homogenized leaf just yet. That's later down the road. Right now, we're just talking about the implementation of machinery and how it's affecting citizens across the United States in the states of which the labor unions are striking, thus forcing the cigar manufacturers to move. And they move to another state and they have the same issues: labor unions, politics, sanitary conditions, false advertisement, over advertisement, you name it. And look, I just got a package right now from the Vintage Cigar Store. And I gotta tell you, I'm really, really excited about this package because it includes quite a number of historical cigars. Here we have, as you can see, just take out the Bovita pack. This is, to me, you know, a very, very interesting. There you go. So this here is a 1940s to 1950s H. Upman, and of course, this is extremely vintage. It's box pressed, very nice, wrapped in its cedar sheath. This is a Perez Mendez El Guajiro Cedros. These two here, these are Puro Cubano Cigarrillos. So this is a Cuban cigarette. It more than likely, not more than likely, these are from the 1950s. And this is from a time, of course, when the competition with cigarettes was increasing to the point where little cigars like this, it felt like it was a necessity to make these. And guess what? They're easy to make with machines. And Cuba did check that out as well, the machines. Let's see what we have here. Oh, look. Let me tell you what we have here. I'm going to take out three cigars. One I think you've already seen before. Okay, so this is the Bances. The Bances is a cigar that is known to be the last brand to actually carry Cuban tobacco in it well past the 1960s. Kind of grandfathered in, right? And this brand, we'll talk more about it at another time, but this is a very interesting cigar. The jewel here is a 1930s Dutch Master cigar. So you can see that right here. And yeah, it's looks like it's from the 1930s. But shoot, I wish I had better control of my camera. But there you go. Also, just a legendary cigar brand. Sorry about the blur. Now here, this is an Earl Marshall tipped cigar. And we're going to talk at a later point in time about tipped cigars, but we're also going to talk about the company behind this particular cigar, the Earl Marshall cigar, because that's another history lesson. But there you have that. You know, now we can proceed with the video that will probably bore you for the next 15 minutes, but if you listen to it, you will, like I said before, pick up on just what was brewing, how early it was brewing, with the switch from the handmade to the machine-made cigars. If you're not interested in that, that's quite fine. Thank you for watching Backyard Cigars. So now we're at the point where we get to the year 1919 and the strike. And by the time that the strike occurred, there were articles listing interest in a plot of land near Columbus Avenue a year before the strike. And I read this because it was sort of a gossip column that actually believed that I believe either Waitt or Bond, one of the two, was purchasing this plot of land to build a mansion or another home. And what they had no idea was that what Waitt and Bond was doing was scouting that land for the future purpose of building a new factory on Columbus Avenue. And they didn't actually end up choosing that plot of land, even though they bought it. They didn't actually use it for their factory. They used it for something else. I'm not quite sure. But by the summer of 1919, Waitt and Bond had been settled into Newark, New Jersey. And they didn't move into a large factory right away. They were operating from a few different satellite warehouse factory type locations, Jersey City and Newark. And so they had about 3 or 4 different locations. Of those locations, none of them exist today. I believe in the place of quite a few of them, what you're going to find are homes, small homes. And in the case of one of their largest ones on Wycliffe Street, you see the shell of it. If you look on Google Maps, you'll see the shell of it. and it looks like they're going to build condominiums in that location now. But when they eventually moved in to the new digs in Newark is not exactly when they arrived to New Jersey. There are two separate dates for that. This is from the Tobacco Record, October 29th, 1919. And I'm going to read this because it's relevant. The old story of the killing of the goose that laid the golden eggs. The union cigar makers of Boston are bitterly bewailing the fact that the removal of the big Waitt Bond factory from Boston to Newark, New Jersey. One of the representatives of the Cigar Makers Union at a recent meeting of cigar makers said, "These cigar manufacturers have spent thousands of dollars in advertising. These well-known and popular brands, Blackstone and Totem, here therefore manufactured popular brands in New England. Now because of this trouble, they move their factory into another state. And they expect to ship their cigars back to New England without the union label." The spokesman for the union might have gone still further and said, with the entire truthfulness, that the firm of Waitt Bond stood staunchly by the Cigar Makers Union for nearly half a century. They operated a union factory, paid the full scale of wages demanded by the union, and carried the blue label of the union on every one of the millions of boxes of cigars shipped from the factory. Furthermore, he might have said with equal truthfulness that the firm of Waitt Bond were foremost among the large employers in maintaining comfortable conditions for their working people. The big Blackstone factory was one of the last and one of the best examples of what a modern cigar making establishment should be found in the entire country. And how did the Union Cigar Makers of Boston repay this loyalty and kindly consideration on the part of Waitt Bond? They literally conspired to destroy the business that it had taken nearly half a century to build up. It was not a question of increased wages that precipitated the strike that forced Waitt Bond to remove their factory from Boston and to discontinue the use of the union label. Had the matter of wages been the only contention, the firm would have met employees on common ground and adjusted the matter in a spirit of fair play. But the demands of the union cigar makers were of so undesirable a character as to mean the virtual destruction of the business, if acceded to, and left nothing for the firm to do but to part company with the union and remove the factory from Boston. Now, when it is everlasting too late, the union cigar makers of Boston are beginning to realize that through their own unreasoning folly, they have killed the goose that has been laying the golden eggs for themselves and their predecessors for almost a half a century. It is by no means probable that Boston will ever again see a firm of the prominence, resources, and financial strength of Waitt Bond that will remain loyal to the Cigar Makers Union and accord its members such kindly consideration as this house has done for nearly 5 decades. There you have it. Now, in 1919, with this new cigar factory being left behind, and their arrival on the scene in New Jersey, their talk shifted towards sanitary conditions. And they were laying down the groundwork or the foundation for what a future cigar company would take and run with and add a dose of malice to their advertising in regards to hygiene and sanitary conditions. But the fact of the matter is that at this point in time, in the early 1900s, approaching the Roaring Twenties, you were finding that there was a lot of talk of sanitary conditions. Not surprisingly, a few years not long ago, you had the Spanish flu, influenza, and that pandemic. So there were a lot of things that were taken into consideration, very much the way that things changed and shifted uh, after COVID, post COVID. You had this talk of sanitary conditions in just about every industry. And the Better Business Bureau was getting involved. They were just babies at the time, but they were starting to grow. And but it would be uh, over a decade before they had any kind of authority to really influence the public. At this point in time, what influences the public is advertising, and whether it's truthful advertising or deceptive advertising, there aren't many checks and balances on what people can advertise. It's not a surprise that you constantly hear people getting called out as snake oil salesmen. And this was quite common still is today. Still is today, honestly, just in a different way. In the Shoemaker's Journal of January of 1920, the union put out their own statement, and they said the actual conditions in the cigar business. And to give you a taste of what they said, they pretty much accused some of the cigar companies, including Waitt Bond, of already having prepared factories in New Jersey. In other words, trying to say they weren't negotiating in good faith and they were going to move anyway. But the fact of the matter is that they had to prepare for the worst, and it didn't make any sense for them not to be prepared. Now, the union goes on to say, "We wish the public to know, in its own interest, that machine-made cigars are not classed as union-made, and that they are obviously inferior to handmade goods. The public should also know that no union cigar makers work in the shops of these firms. If you want well-made, handmade, union-made cigars, do not smoke cigars made by these firms. Your guarantee is the blue union label of the Cigar Makers International Union on the box issued by the New England Label Conference." And so they were encouraging people to buy the blue label union made. And the problem with that was that it was no longer being billed or advertised as the superior product, even if it was. Because people were getting used to the low prices of machine-made cigars. And they were getting used to the fact that they were still very good. Very, very good, if not just as good as the handmade product. Now, obviously, there are differences. In many cases, the main difference would be the long filler versus the short filler. But listen, I've shown in videos before that there are short filler cigars, if made right, with the right tobacco, that can rival the best long filler cigars. So there you have it. In the Printer's Ink, May 13, 1920, there's an article where it details the shift to the machine-made cigar, right? And the writer is stating that basically the machines turn out 3,500 cigars a day, each of them exact duplicate of the master cigar. In the case of the handmade product, each one depended on the mood and the attention of the worker. In the machine made, each one is the exact replica of the master cigar. They were not touched by anything except aluminum and steel, whereas the old handmade cigars were often accused of not being made as hygienically as could be. The new machine is said to perform every process of the manipulation of the most experienced cigar maker. It is run by girls. The girls in the new Waitt Bond factory in Newark are trained in schoolrooms and paid as they learn. And so not only are they making a cigar that stands up to the long filler, hand rolled, traditional, right? Not only are they doing that, but they're also saving money on how they make it, in not just the machines, but the labor. And what's pissing this guy off is that worse, we've been replaced not just by machines, but by girls. And I think that stings a little bit. And there constant mentions of how a father cannot support his family, a cigar roller cannot support his family, yet his daughter's coming home with a week's salary, for working at the factory. And his wife is working a couple of hours here and there, and she's coming home with some money. So, but there's that dynamic, where the husband feels, or the man in this case, man, feels as he's being usurped, and there is that attitude. So it's a little bit of machismo involved in that as well. But on the flip side, the argument is, hey, look, they're not just being trained in school. The reality is that they're skipping school, and they're coming to work, and they're neglecting their education. So not only is my daughter supporting our family, but she's also neglecting her education, and she needs it more than I do. So I think that was one of the arguments as well.